I'm Adam Burns and welcome to Meet the Boss TV. This week I'm in London at IEA and Marketforce's 4th annual Renewables Conference. I'm here to talk about the winds of change with Michael Lewis, Managing Director for Europe at E.ON Climate and Renewables. E.ON Climate and Renewables is responsible for the E.ON Group's global renewables and climate protection activities, and Michael Lewis is responsible for it. In a few minutes we'll be talking about his key learnings from previous wind projects, but we start with a little bit of background. Recently promoted to this new role, I asked Michael what were his initial challenges.
I think the challenges were threefold to start with. We created a new organisation. It was part of E.ON's overall strategy to move towards a lower carbon generation portfolio, and we therefore had to pull together three different elements in order to create EC&R. Firstly, the existing renewables businesses that we had within the E.ON Group, which had previously been run on a geographical basis. Secondly, we had to keep managing the growth that was already in the portfolio. And three, we had to manage external growth because we made 2 acquisitions initially and a further one later, all of them in different countries. So there was a major challenge of what I'd call integration, i.e. making sure that our own people who were in the E.ON Group were now moving into a new division, E.ON Climate and Renewables. And then we had to create an integrated strategy for the new division. And that was based on both different technologies and different geographies. And that was all about creating the right strategic focus, focusing on markets where, firstly, there was sufficient growth where we could invest our money, and secondly, they were attractive markets where we could get a decent return on our investment. I think the final big challenge we had was bringing new centralised functions into the organisation. I'll give you an example. In the past, we had renewables business in the UK, we had a renewables business in Nordic, and we had a renewables business in Germany. And all of them worked independently. So for example, if we were going out to the market to buy turbines, they would work independently of one another. So we created a new department, procurement, centrally in Dusseldorf, which now takes care of all turbine procurement, plus other things as well, for the whole of the E.ON Group within E.ON Climate and Renewables.
You've recently signed off on the London Array project and an agreement with Siemens for the Rodsand Danish wind project. What key lessons can you share, I suppose, with other sort of energy companies who are now having, I think, very much to make these steps?
Well, I think offshore is a very important area for the future of the European Union renewables targets. If you look at all of the work that's been done about how we get to 20% of primary energy from renewables by 2020 or beyond, it requires a large investment in offshore technology. Now, if you look at where we are today, we're around something like 1.5 to 2 gigawatts of total installed offshore capacity. If we're going to meet the target, we need to get to something like 40 to 50 gigawatt. So that's a huge increase. And that's in a short period as well, 10 to 15 years. So that means we've got to, A, prove the technology capable of operating in the harsh marine environment, and B, get the supply chain focused on delivering solutions so we can actually install them quickly and efficiently. And so what we've tried to do is build a renewables offshore strategy which tries to take the easier locations first. So it's a question of the physical nature of the projects, because offshore is not offshore. There are varying degrees of offshore. For example, the first project we did, Scroby Sands in the UK off Great Yarmouth, is a very near-shore project, 3 kilometres from the coast, relatively shallow water, 5 metres deep. That is comparatively easy, both to install because of the proximity to the shore, to operate because of the proximity to the shore, and also to put the foundations in place because of the relatively shallow water. And what we're doing is now moving into larger projects like Rodsand, which is a much bigger project than Scroby Sands, 207 megawatts as compared to 60 megawatts at Scroby Sands, which is still in relatively shallow water near Denmark, about 5 kilometres from the shore, 10 metre deep water, and that means we can use the skills we learned at Scroby to build a bigger wind farm with larger turbines and a bigger capacity. We want to prove that we can do this on a large scale, and not only Rodsand in Denmark, we also have another project, 180 megawatts in the UK at Robin Rig in the Solway Firth, again proving that we can install at a large scale but still in the relatively near shore, shallow water environment. When we've mastered those projects and we've proved that we can install efficiently, that we can get the right vessels to the sites so that we can have a reduced cycle time and reduce the capital costs, and when we're happy that the turbines can operate well in that environment, we then intend to move into the larger, what we call far shore deep water projects. So these are projects outside of the 20 metre depth and 20 kilometres from shore envelope. Those projects will be a bigger challenge both in the installation and in the operational phase. So we want to learn our trade in the so-called offshore light projects before we move to the difficult ones. And London Array, which we recently approved, that's the largest offshore project in the world actually, or it will be when it's constructed, I should say. That's 1,000 megawatts, and again, just to put that into context, Scroby Sands, the one we have at the moment, is 60 megawatts, so much, much bigger proposition. But again, it's about learning the trade, learning how to build a project of that size, and making sure we can operate it efficiently.
How do you ensure, what's your role in making sure that ECNR remains a learning organisation? What sort of metrics are you using from each project, I suppose?
Yeah. Well, we have a process of learning from all the projects, not only at the end, where we do an audit of what happened, what went right, what went wrong, could we improve next time, but also as we go along. And I have regular meetings with my offshore director, who's responsible for managing the 4 offshore projects we now have under construction, where we go through a fixed agenda on how each piece of work is progressing, how the installation is progressing, and what challenges we're facing. And if we do find an issue that is coming up frequently and occurring on one or more project, then we flag that up as something we need to deal with maybe in a more generic way. So for example, we may have health and safety incidents where we have a very sophisticated method of tracking what we call near misses, where there wasn't necessarily an issue caused, but it had the potential to cause an injury. And we would see, if we start to see a pattern, we will raise that up and look to do maybe a more detailed investigation into what we can improve in terms of process or in terms of safety equipment. So there's a constant learning in that sense, and obviously health and safety is extremely important, particularly when you're out in the offshore environment, which is why that is one of the key focuses. We also look at various other aspects about the cycle time for how quickly we're installing the foundations or the turbines. And when we move into the operational phase, we look at critical variables like how much downtime we have and the availability of the turbines. So there's a whole suite of metrics we use to compare performance, both in the construction and in the operational phases.
And what about the sort of staff issues, I suppose, that go alongside that? Because the crews that have done this work, their knowledge must be incredibly valuable to ECNR. How do you, I suppose, prevent staff attrition and also at the same time make sure that you're training new people up?
Well, this is exactly why we created a centralised function on offshore construction, because you're absolutely right, people are critical to this. And not just our own people who manage the projects, but the crews who work for the contractors and the vessels. These are highly skilled people, and you need to provide the right level of motivation for them. Our job as a developer and operator of assets is to provide a good visibility in our project pipeline. So that means we want to have a number of projects in development close to construction and then in construction simultaneously. So it means we can move people and people can see they've got a structured career in front of them. If we just do project after project on an ad hoc basis and there's large gaps in between them, then clearly you do risk losing people because they'll want to move on and move on to another project that maybe one of the competitors is doing. So our job is to manage the pipeline so that we give people structured progression. They can learn their trade, the younger people on projects with more experienced project managers, before they can in turn move on to another project in a structured way. So it's all about continuity is what I'd say. That's the key thing we have to do.
Michael, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
For more fantastic interviews directly related to your business, be sure to explore Meet the Boss TV.